Hello, everyone. I hope you've all had a fantastic weekend. It is that time. It is time for our third instalment of George's Marvellous Medicine. And if you remember on Friday, we've got to the point where George has made his medicine for his nasty grandma. And the next chapter is called Grandma Gets the Medicine. So, Grandma sat hunched in her chair by the window. The wicked little eyes followed George closely as he crossed the room towards her. "You're late," she snapped. "I don't think I am, Grandma." "Don't interrupt me in the middle of a sentence," she shouted. "But you'd finished your sentence, Grandma." "There you go again," she cried. "Always interrupting and arguing. You really are a tiresome little boy. What's the time?" "It's exactly 11 o'clock, Grandma." "You're lying as usual. Stop talking so much and give me my medicine. Shake the bottle first, then pour it into the spoon and make sure it's a whole spoonful." "Are you going to go all down in one go?" George asked her, "or will you sip it?" "What I do is none of your business," the old woman said. "Fill the spoon." As George removed the cork and began very slowly to pour the thick brown stuff into the spoon, he couldn't help thinking back upon all the mad and marvellous things that had gone into making this very crazy stuff. The shaving soap, the hair remover, the dandruff cure, the automatic washing powder, the flea powder for dogs, the shoe polish, the black pepper, the horseradish sauce, and all the rest of them. Not to mention the powerful animal pills and powders and liquids, and the brown paint. "Open your mouth wide, Grandma," he said, "and I'll pop it in." The old hag opened her small, wrinkled mouth, showing disgusting pale brown teeth. "Here we go," George cried out. "Swallow it down." He pushed the spoon well into her mouth and tipped the mixture down her throat. Then he stepped back to watch the result. It was worth watching. Grandma yelled, "Ow-wee!" and her whole body shot up, whoosh, into the air. It was exactly as though someone had pushed an electric wire through the underneath of her chair and switched on the current. Up she went like a jack-in-the-box, and she didn't come down. She stayed there, suspended in mid-air. About 2 feet up, still in a sitting position, but rigid now, frozen, quivering, the eyes bulging, the hair standing straight up on end. "Is something wrong, Grandma?" George asked her politely. "Are you all right?" Suspended up there in space, the old girl was beyond speaking. The shock that George's marvellous mixture had given her must have been tremendous. You'd have thought she'd swallowed a red-hot poker the way she took off into that chair. Then down she came again, with a plop back into her seat. "Call the fire brigade!" she shouted suddenly. "My stomach's on fire!" "Fire? Sorry, it's just medicine, Grandma," George said. "It's good stuff." "Fire!" the old woman yelled. "Fire in the basement! Get a bucket! Man the hoses! Do something quick!" "Call it, Grandma," George said. But he's got a bit of a shock when he saw the smoke coming out of her mouth and out of her nostrils. Clouds of black smoke were coming out of her nose and blowing around the room. "By golly, you really are on fire," George said. "Of course I'm on fire," she yelled. "I'll be burned to a crisp. I'll be fried to a frizzle. I'll be boiled like a beetroot." George ran to the kitchen and came back with a jug of water. "Open your mouth, Grandma," he cried. He could hardly see her for the smoke, but he managed to pour half a jugful down her throat. A sizzling sound, the kind you get if you hold a hot frying pan under a cold tap, came up from deep down in Grandma's stomach. The old hag bucked and shied and snorted. She gasped and gurgled. Spouts of water came shooting out of her, and the smoke cleared away. "The fire's out," George announced proudly. "You'll be all right now, Grandma." "All right?" she yelled. "Who's all right? There's Jackie jumpers in my tummy. There's squigglers in my belly. There's bangers in my bottom." She began bouncing up and down in the chair. Quite obviously, she was not very comfortable. "You'll find it doing you a lot of good, that medicine, Grandma," George said. "Good?" she screamed. "Doing me good? It's killing me!" Then she began to bulge. She was swelling. She was puffing up all over. Someone was pumping her up. That's how it looked. Was she going to explode? Her face was turning from purple to green. But wait, she had a puncture somewhere. George could hear the hiss of escaping air. She stopped swelling. She was going down. She was slowly getting thinner again, shrinking back and back, slowly to her shrivelled old self. "How's things, Grandma?" George said. No answer. Then a funny thing happened. Grandma's body gave a sudden, sharp twist and a sudden, sharp jerk, and she flipped herself clear out of the chair and landed neatly on her 2 feet on the carpet. "That's terrific, Grandma," George cried. "You haven't stood up like that for years. Look at you. You're standing up all on your own, and you're not even using your stick." Grandma didn't even hear him. The frozen, pop-eyed look was back with her again now. She was miles away in another world. Marvellous medicine, George told himself. He found it fascinating to stand there watching what it was doing to the old hag. What next, he wondered. He soon found out. It was quite slow at first, just a very gradual inching upwards. Up, 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 inch by inch, getting taller and taller. About an inch every few seconds, and in the beginning, George didn't notice it. But when she had passed the 5'6" mark and was going up towards being 6 feet tall, George gave a jump and shouted, "Hey, Grandma, you're growing! You're growing up!" "Hang on, Grandma, you'd better stop now, or you'll be hitting the ceiling." But Grandma didn't stop. It was a truly fantastic sight. This ancient, scrawny old woman getting taller and taller, longer and longer, thinner and thinner, as though she were a piece of elastic being pulled towards by invisible hands. When the top of her head actually touched the ceiling, George thought she was bound to stop. But she didn't. There was a sort of scrunching noise, and bits of plaster and cement came raining down. "Hadn't you better stop now, Grandma?" George said. "Daddy's just had this whole room repainted." But there was no stopping her now. Soon, her head and shoulders had completely disappeared through the ceiling, and she was still going. George dashed upstairs to his own bedroom, and there she was, coming up through the floor like a mushroom. "Whoopee!" she shouted, finding her voice at last. "Hallelujah! Here I come!" "Steady on, Grandma," George said, with a "hey nonny no," and "up we go," she shouted. "Just watch me grow." "This is my room," George said. "Look at the mess you're making." "Terrific medicine," she cried. "Give me some more." "She's dotty as a donut," George thought. "Come on, boy, give me some more," she yelled. "Dish it out. I'm slowing down." George was still clutching the medicine bottle in one hand and the spoon in the other. Oh, well, he thought, why not? He poured out a second dose and popped it into her mouth. "Ow-wee!" She screamed up, and she went up again. Her feet were still on the floor downstairs in the living room, but her head was moving quickly towards the ceiling of the bedroom. "I'm on my way now, boy," she called down to George. "Just watch me go." "That's the attic above you, Grandma," George called out. "I'd keep out of there. It's full of bugs and boggles." Crash! The old girl's head went through the ceiling as though it was butter. George stood in the bedroom, gazing at the shambles. There was a big hole in the floor and another in the ceiling, and sticking up like a post between the two was the middle part of Grandma. Her legs were in the room below, her head in the attic. "I'm still going," came the old screechy voice from up above. "Give me another dose, my boy, and let's go through the roof." "No, Grandma, no," George called back. "You're busting up the whole house." "To heck with the house," she shouted. "I want some fresh air. I haven't been outside for 20 years. "By golly, she is going through the roof," George told himself. He ran downstairs. He rushed out of the back door into the yard. It would be simply awful, he thought, if she bashed up the roof as well. His father would be furious, and he, George, would get the blame. He had made the medicine. He had given her too much. "Don't come through the roof, Grandma," he prayed. "Please don't." The next chapter is called The Brown Hen. George stood in the farmyard looking up at the roof. The old farmhouse had a fine roof of pale red tiles and tall chimneys. There was no sign of Grandma. there was only a song thrush sitting on one of the chimney pots singing a song. The old Wurzels got stuck in the attic, George thought. Thank goodness for that. Suddenly, a tile came clattering down from the roof and fell into the yard. The song thrush took off fast and flew away. Then another tile came down, then half a dozen more, and then, very slowly, like some weird monster rising up from the deep, Grandma's head came through the roof. Then her scrawny neck and the top of her shoulders. "How am I doing, boy?" she shouted. "How's that for a bash-up?" "Don't you think you'd better stop now, Grandma?" George called out. "I have stopped," she answered. "I feel terrific." "Didn't I tell you I had magic powers? Didn't I warn you I had wizardry in the tips of my fingers? But you wouldn't listen to me, would you? You wouldn't listen to your old Grandma." "You didn't do it, Grandma," George shouted back to her. "I did it. I made a new medicine." "A new medicine? You? What rubbish!" she yelled. I did it," George shouted. "You're lying as usual," Grandma yelled. "You're always lying." "I'm not lying, Grandma. I swear I'm not." The wrinkled old face high up on the roof stared down suspiciously at George. "Are you telling me you actually made a new medicine all by yourself?" she shouted. "Yes, Grandma, all by myself." "I don't believe you," she answered. "But I'm very comfortable up here. Fetch me a cup of tea." A brown hen was pecking about in the yard close to where George was standing. The hen gave him an idea. Quickly, he uncorked the medicine bottle and poured some of the brown stuff into the spoon. "What's this, Grandma?" he shouted. He crouched down, holding out the spoon to the hen. "Chicken," he said. Chicken. Come here. Have some of this." Chickens were stupid birds and very greedy. They think everything is food. This one thought the spoon was full of corn. It hopped over, put its head to one side and looked at the spoon. "Come on, chicken," George said. "Good chicken. Chick. The brown hen stretched out its neck towards the spoon and went peck. It got a beakful of medicine. The effect was electric. "Ah-wee!" shrieked the hen, and it shot straight into the air like a rocket. It went as high as the house. And then it came down again into the yard, splosh, and there it sat, with its feathers all sticking straight out from its body. There was a look of amazement on its silly face. George stood watching it. Grandma stood up on the roof and was watching it too. The hen got to its feet. It was rather shaky. It was making funny gurgling noises in its throat. Its beak was opening and shutting. It seemed like a pretty sick hen. "You've done it now, you stupid boy!" Grandma shouted. "The hen's going to die. Your father will have after you now. He'll give you socks and serves you right." All of a sudden, black smoke started pouring out of the hen's beak. "It's on fire!" Grandma yelled. "The hen's on fire!" George ran to the water trough to get a bucket of water. "That hen'll roasted and be ready for eating any moment," Grandma shouted. George sloshed the bucket of water over the hen. There was a sizzling sound and the smoke went away. "Old hen laid his last egg," Grandma shouted. "Hens don't do any laying after they've been on fire." Now that the fire was out, the hen seemed better. It stood up properly. It flapped its wings. Then it crouched down, low to the ground, as though getting ready to jump. It did jump. It jumped high in the air and turned a complete somersault, then landed back on its feet. "It's a circus hen," Grandma shouted from the rooftop. "It's a flipping acrobat." Now the hen began to grow. George had been waiting for this to happen. "It's growing," he yelled. "It's growing, Grandma. Look, it's growing." Bigger and bigger, taller and taller it grew. Soon the hen was 4 or 5 times its normal size. "Can you see it, Grandma?" George shouted. "I can see it, boy," the old girl shouted back. "I'm watching it." George was hopping about from one foot to the other with excitement, pointing at the enormous head and shouting, "It's had the magic medicine, Grandma. It's growing just like you did." But there was a difference between the way the hen was growing and the way Grandma grew. When Grandma grew taller and taller, she got thinner and thinner. The hen didn't. It stayed nice and plump all along. Soon it was taller than George, But it didn't stop there. It went right on growing until it was as big as a horse. Then it stopped. "Doesn't it look marvellous, Grandma?" George shouted. "It's not as tall as me," Grandma sang out. "Compared with me, that end is titchy small. I am the tallest of them all." And look, you can see Grandma peering down from the roof. I'm going to stop there. It's getting exciting, isn't it? That Grandma seems a bit cheerful now after that medicine, doesn't she? Be interesting to see what's going to happen next. I hope you're enjoying the story. Do, again, remember, if you have a copy of the book, do come along tomorrow and read along the next few chapters, because that'd be fantastic too. Look forward to seeing you all soon. Take care. Bye-bye.